Hi, welcome. My name is Maris Kreisman, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you to another excellent virtual event at McNally Jackson. If you go to mcnallyjackson.com and look at our events calendar, you'll see all the amazing writers and programs we're hosting in the coming weeks. Please keep an eye on the site or subscribe to our newsletter to hear more about what's coming soon. There will be time at the end of tonight's conversation for your questions, so start thinking about them now. You can use the Zoom chat function to submit any questions you have, and we'll get to them towards the end of the evening, as long as they're not long, trolly kinds of messages about how to get your science fiction book published. We're so glad that even though we can't all be in the same room at the moment, we're still able to host events during this difficult time. As we've weathered the pandemic and reopened all 4 of our locations for browsing and shopping, indie bookstores like ours still need more support. And so if you enjoy free events like this and want us to keep hosting more of them, please buy books from us. Throughout the evening, I'll be posting links in the chat to buy The Blizzard Party from McNally Jackson. John Freeman Gill in the New York Times Book Review said, "The Blizzard Party is a raucously inventive tale of loss and erasure, told with an authorial assurance uncommon in a first novel. This rollickingly bleak rendering of 1970s New York is well worth a visit." And we are so pleased to visit there tonight. Thrilled to welcome the author, Jack Livings. He's the author of the story collection, The Dog, which was awarded the 2015 Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize and the Rome Prize for Literature. And The Blizzard Party is his first novel. He lives in New York City with his family. And joining Jack tonight is Ben Ryder Howe. He's a writer whose work has appeared in the New York Times and other publications. He's the author of My Korean Deli. And it's great to have both of you. And if you want to start with a reading, Jack, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Thank you so much, Maris, and thanks to McNally Jackson, of course, for hosting this and so many great events, and for keeping us all alive in a literary sense and other senses too, I guess. If anybody who's on tonight, thank you all for coming as well, I should say. If any of you don't have the book and I don't scare you away from it, please consider ordering a copy from McNally Jackson or swing by and pick one up, which I think we can do now. They're a great bookstore with a really important presence in this city, important to the literary life of this city. So anything we can do to support them would be great. So I'm going to start off with a reading from the early section, an early section of The Blizzard Party. The story is there's a blizzard in New York in 1978, and some very wealthy New Yorkers who have a penthouse apartment throw a party, and they invite everybody. It's a huge party. It's a blowout, and lots of other things are going on at the same time. And one of which is that another resident of the building, who's an old man with dementia, has wandered out. He's managed to escape the building in the watchful eye of his family, and he's wandering out in the snow and is found by a young man named Vic Patel, who does not live in the Apelles, but guides him back to the Apelles. The man is coherent enough to say that he lives there, but can't remember what apartment he lives in. So they arrive in the lobby of this building, and it's mayhem, no doorman, it's body to body, it's people all going up to the party. And so they just get on the elevator and go to the party. And Vic thinks, well, somebody there is bound to know where this old dude lives. So this is what happens when they get off the elevator and enter the apartment. Inside, the entrance galley was dim and thick with smoke. Not the painterly striations that hang suspended in opium dens like the gossamer robes of angels, but a searing, heavy storm of smoke that had established itself as the essential medium through which all commerce would be conducted. The Joan Mitchell hanging directly across from the door was nothing but a hint of blue through a fog bank. bricks of marijuana had been combusted and were presently lounging around in cottony clouds, mingling with enough R.J. Reynolds, Bright Leaf, and Burley to balance the North Carolina state budget. Here and there, microclimates. The sharp masculinity of cohibas, toros, presidentes, ascots, perfectos, chisels, canoodling with feminine curls of drum, Sir Walter Raleigh, Borkham Riff, Sutliff vanilla custard, Prince Albert. Like a descant, the mysterious perfume of cloves everywhere, nowhere. In darker corners, the harsh burn of beaties. Enterprising young Tanawat Konkatitum, known to his friends at Columbia as Hiwatt, after P. Townsend's customary stack, had set up a pair of multi-hose hookahs in the library and was charging the exorbitant sum of $8 US for a bowl of shisha and hash. He was doing a bang-up business, but it was getting crowded as the remains of his previous customers were taking up all the floor space. They were great for marketing, but Christ on a bicycle, Hiwatt said to a woman in 4-inch spikes who was walking across an unresponsive carpet of bodies, step right up. Vic, looking for somewhere to stow Albert while he inquired about where exactly in the building the old man lived, was blown away from the pulsing heart of the party like a sloop caught in a squall, toward the residential wing by the excruciating volume of the song, Iggy Pop grinding out Lust for Life on about its 8th curtain call. To the east were 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms that branched off a dark central hall, lined with cubist paintings, couples making out, triangular shadows, more smoke, one of Hiwatt's customers sleeping Pompeii style atop a Nelson bench, and underfoot a foreboding tangle of clothing. The doors were all closed, and Albert stood docile at Vic's side as he rapped on the first one. Impossible to hear anything over the noise, he cracked and peeked and saw, oh yeah, an orgy, or group action, at least, definitely XXX, if not a full-scale Dionysian revel, pumping asses and hairy bellies, the juxtaposition and rejuxtaposition of arms over legs over arms, the dull flash of jewelry glinting in the oily light from the bedside lamp, which had been boudoired with an orange paisley silk. He lingered, but withdrew before the shoe hit the door. Too amped up now to rethink its process, he tried the next one. It was a bathroom. A couple was in the tub. Another was attempting to destroy the toilet with their ride-em cowboy antics. Water everywhere, yipping. It smelled like sandalwood and patchouli. The next, a bedroom, another group fling, a more Germanic arrangement. 2 women on the bed, 5 men around the edges, pants pulled at their ankles, and what appeared to be a game of cribbage underway at the table beneath the window. Albert lingered dreamily at Vic's side. God damn, Vic thought as he reached for door number 4, his fingers trembling with voyeuristic ecstasy. Alas, the room he was about to enter was virtually empty. I was the stain on that virtue, sleeping peacefully on the bed beneath a blanket of cyan TV snow, alone, unperturbed, because no matter how perverse the diabolical plans in the drug-soaked brains of the partiers, by some miracle, none of them included getting it on in front of, with, or around a little girl. So it was that with a mixture of relief and disappointment, Vic parked Albert on a creaky teak chair next to a wooden statue of a Maasai herder, taking care not to wake the kid sacked out atop the coverlet. He had no idea how old I was. A little kid, that was how I registered. And he whispered to Albert that he'd be back soon. What a thoughtful boy. Having secured the addled old man, he closed the door behind him and went to find an adult who might be able to tell him where Albert, who had nothing to say on the matter, lived.
Can I jump in now?
Please.
Well, let me say that in preparation for tonight, I intended to ask Jack's friends to suggest questions. However, if you've already read The Blizzard Party, which is populated by characters nurturing exquisite hatred for their friends and family, you won't be surprised to know what I found out, which is that Jack has only one friend, and I am that person. A few quick words about Jack, who I met in 2003 when we were both at the Paris Review, and I helped edit an interview that Jack did with Tobias Wolff. I remember standing on at a bus stop on 72nd and Madison, it's a beautiful summer day, reading a galley of the interview that Jack had done with Tobias Wolff, and being irritated that it was so precise, so free of ego, and so enjoyable that I kept forgetting to actually edit it. It annoyed me because I realized that I didn't know Jack at all, who was nothing if not genial, but certainly understated. 18 years later, I've come to realize that this makes me a candidate for inclusion in a Jack Livings short story or novel, as someone who only feels like they're connecting with the universe when they're at their most misanthropic. In Jack's new book, one of the principal characters is an author who has written a bestseller but disdains publicity and won't even attend his own book parties. So his publisher threatens to send him on a worldwide tour, which made me wonder, how did they get you out here tonight, Jack? And since there's also a character in the book who runs a well-regarded sex dungeon, do you want to give us a safe word in case this becomes too excruciating?
That's great. Just keep going. That's
So Jack's previous book was a book of short stories set in China, and the authors, the characters, narrators, everybody was Chinese, and which I saw as a sort of a ascetic, almost monk-like act of displacement. This book really is begs to be read in a personal way in every paragraph, and I wondered if that was the source of some of the violence in the book and some of the rage. You start exporting yourself from that perspective of the person who's writing through other lives and resisting the urge to personalize everything. Was that hard to make that transition to a book where there's a lot of you in here?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. I mean, and also thank you for saying nice things about me, among everything else. Yeah, so the dog was an exercise in objectivity because of the sensitivity of what I was writing about. I don't know that I necessarily thought about it this way, but in retrospect, I didn't want to get it wrong. And I did a tremendous amount of research on the most minuscule detail, like angle of the sun in Beijing on a certain day at a certain place. You know, it got really absurd because I was desperately afraid that I was going to, because I don't live there. I lived there briefly, read a lot about China, and that seeped into the language as well, the way that I handled the voices in that book. And it was, I think form is a good thing. And I think poets deal with this a lot more than fiction writers do, and are more comfortable in it, but it almost felt like a straitjacket to me. And I gladly wore it when I was working on that book. But everything about that book was circumscribed, and I was very, very careful with a lot of it. And so I was ready not to ever do that again when I started this one. And I thought, because this is how I operate, I'll go completely in the opposite direction, and I'll throw all the gates open, all the windows, let everything in, let everything out.
Throw the furniture off the roof.
Yeah. I mean, the book started as a book about my father, and this was 10 years ago when I started taking notes about it. And my dad was an opera singer who was deeply talented, powerfully violent human being, and he could be enormously loving and also terrifying within the space of 5 minutes. And it's not a new story. I think especially fathers of earlier eras. But the question, that always informs everything that I think I write is why. Why? What happened? Why was he that way? And I wasn't terrifically close to him. I felt like when I was with him, I was very close to him, but then we would separate and not see each other for years and years. So in that respect, my approach to this book was very similar to the approach I took to China, which was an act of imagination and trying to construct something that I will never fully be able to understand. And I know a lot about my father. He has a beautiful family who are very kind to me, and his siblings have told me lots of things about him when he was younger, but he had a horrible loss when he was very young. He was married once before he married my mom, and his son drowned when he was 3 years old on Mother's Day, no less, at my father's parents' house. And so that was my starting point for this book. And I think if you start with something that personal, you can't, to me, it felt like I couldn't leave anything out. So the book swole up pretty bad at one point. It was about 900 pages long. And my dad populates different characters in the book, just as I do. But it's, and he also, not incidentally, suffered from dementia, which is central to the action one of the characters undertakes in this book as well. So yeah, so this book is a very it feels, it's a lot wilder in every imaginable way, and I'm pleased with it because it is. I feel like there's a friend who's a great writer named Greg Baxter, who after the dog came out, wrote me a beautiful email telling me how much he liked it. But he said, the difference is I write from the inside out and you write from the outside in. And I didn't fully comprehend what he meant, but it was one of those things that sticks in your head. And I thought about it for a long time, and it sounded like a little bit of a challenge. Everything sounds like a challenge to me. And, so I thought, well, maybe I should try to write from the inside out. So, that's why there's a therapist in the center of this book too. It's very much kind of an act of divulging, maybe not so much secrets, but deeply, deeply felt stuff.
I was going to ask you about the therapist, because the relationship between the patient and the therapist is adversarial, and as are many of the relationships in the book. The friendships are based on, hostility seems almost too mild to describe the way these people, go at each other. And I was thinking about my own friendship with you, which is anything but adversarial, but anything but hostile. It's nothing but supportive. But wondering, did you feel that with this book that you had to have that kind of interrogation, where you were really digging in with something? And to some extent, you've already answered that, but yeah, there was a feeling of an almost sort of self-punishing reflection on your on something. I guess that was the question I had. Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's funny. I feel like I learned an awful lot about what I've written from other people, and I tend to write, if I have a philosophy of writing, it's that I'm always trying to look to the left or right of what I'm writing about. I don't want to overcook it, overthink it, overdo it in any way. And I feel like there's the frightening subconscious that feeds things up. And if you can manage not to disturb them, it oftentimes makes for interesting fiction. So it's hard for me to say like what I intended. I'll put it this way. So, I mean, I realize probably most of the people who are here haven't read the book. The therapist, it's interesting to me that you say that it's an adversarial relationship that Irwin Saltwater has with his therapist, because to me, it's very, there's a camaraderie there. It's a very, they're tough on each other. But Irwin is hiding the truth from his therapist, and he has a deep-seated, life-altering truth inside him that he has spent his entire life covering up. And even when he's with the one person who would not judge him, they wind up talking about, Saltwater's goes off about why, Woody Allen does this, or why is this guy funny? Chevy Chase isn't fun. I mean, he's talking about nonsense as a way of avoiding the truth and play acting, which is also what the book is to me about in a larger sense. It's about all the contortions you put yourself through, not to look at what's right in front of you. And so, I mean, I would say like that unfortunately might be my relationship with the book as well.
You have to know the truth to be funny, Saltwater says to the therapist, and the therapist says, and what's the truth? And Saltwater says, we're cannibals, right? I mean, that's the sort of, that's what comes out of their,
Yeah.
If it's not adversarial, it's this, okay, their camaraderie is that they're both misanthropes.
Yeah. And I love misanthropes. I feel like it's oddly enough, I feel like misanthropes, they're the walking id of most people who are too polite to, it's a pit you don't want to actually fall into. I don't think you actually want to be misanthropic, but to me, New York is an island with 8.5 million complaints on it, and that's who we are as a people, New Yorkers.
Well, so there's another line in the book about what is rage but a release, and who doesn't enjoy it just a little. What is there anything else that the characters are raging against besides absent family members, whether it's children or parents or or friends who've let them down or therapists?
Well, I mean, Hazel, who's the narrator of the book and who is recreating her father's novel, which is called The Blizzard Party. It is as much an act of rage, I think, as anything. I mean, she's furious at him for building a Hazel on the page that bumped her off the screen for most of her life. But it's interesting to me. I mean, she loves her father. She loves him dearly, and sees that he's a really broken, crippled person who couldn't protect her. But that can't not engender rage. Not only did he not protect her from this thing that happened to her at the party and these things that she saw, but he then took his failure and turned it into a work of literature that was translated into 27 languages or whatever. This is interesting to me, because my conception of the book is not that it is so much about rage And I love hearing this, because absolutely, I mean, there's a lot of fire. Everybody's got a lot of fire in them. John's angry at his father. Hazel's angry at her father. But then, I mean, then you come back around to what was I writing about initially? You know, I'm not unangry at my own father. I loved him, and he passed away not long ago. But, you know, the two things are mutually coexist within all of us, I think. You know?
I think one of the things that's so unsettling about all of your work, Jack, is that there is this. You torture your characters. There's somebody who's got a knife against his throat in every scene, it feels like. But there was it's not a showpiece. You had some not nice things to say about the conversation, the Gene Hackman movie, because it was a showpiece and it was just the director, you know, doing what he did in order to show off. But I always have the feeling that you actually really do love your characters, and that you really do have this very strong paternal sense of care for them. But that at the same time, you know, you have this also care for the reader, and that you want to reward them for the time that they spend with you, and that there is a but it's unsettling, I find, because I always find I care about these characters, but I suppose it's as basic as I just know something bad is going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And
that's what it says. That's what it says in the first thing in the book, right? Isn't that Saltwater's prologue? Or he says something bad is going to happen. I mean,
Saltwater says blah blah blah.
That's what Hazel says. But Irwin says, prologue, you barrel crouching rodeo clown, you sleight of hand, you basket viper, you abortion of a knock-knock joke, foul whisperer, gossip mongerer, ear enthusiast, be gone. Let me speak clearly in my own voice. Something terrible is about to happen. I mean, why write a book or read a book if something does, you know, something happened.
Right.
You know, something is going to happen. I do feel a tremendous, especially these days. I mean, my own misanthropy really glows brightly when I start thinking about Twitter and the abandonment of concentration and the long, like, and it's not just, I mean, it is partially because I want people to read what I write and what my friends write, and my friends and I write long form stuff, and even a short story seems like it's getting to be a little bit too long form. And you know, the concentration that's required is not a natural act the way I think it might have once been. So those rare blessed souls who will dive into a 400-page book should be rewarded with a little bit of tension and high stakes and action. And I want it to mean something too. I mean, I don't want it to just be you know, a ride from A to B to C to D to E and have a nice day. I want it to resonate in some way.
No, and I have to say, I mean, when I was saying that this book feels personal, it's never self-indulgent. It's never.
Oh, really? I think it is. In some places, that's sweet of you to say. I think in some places it's definitely self-indulgent, but I hope that in those places where I'm being a little self-indulgent, that the reader will forgive me, because maybe there's a pretty turn of phrase on the backside of it, or else they're just too confused to put it down. I mean, I am operating a little bit on the principle, if I can get you to the halfway mark, you're like, I've invested this much time. Let's see if you can pull it off. But I'm sorry, yeah, what you're saying.
Do you want to read the following,
Sure.
the second scene?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to read one more little short piece. So Hazel, who's the narrator, loses her husband in the North Tower on 9/11, and she hears about from a friend named Eden, a company that will recreate the actual office in which her husband died and put her in it so that she can see what it was like. And it's a form of her friend is very careful to say it's not therapy. It doesn't help you get over it. It just puts you there so you can see, and what you do with it is what you do with it. Hazel, I should also note, spends most of the book grappling with the fact that she never quite accepted that her husband, Vic, who was the boy who showed up at the Apelles with Albert Lothas many years ago, that he actually died. She participated in some serious magical thinking and hoping that he had just abandoned her and gotten on a ferry and taken off on the morning of 9/11 and had never bothered to contact her again. So anyway, this is Hazel's first complication. That's the term this company uses for these reenactments. Her team constructed, I'm sorry, I'm going to start a little later. On the appointed day, they sent a car to deliver me to the compound upstate on the Wallkill River. They layered me in Nomex, full hood, breathing apparatus, 40 pounds of shielding, ushered me onto the office floor, where I stood among my husband's colleagues, professional stuntmen and women I now know, variously hammering at their keyboards or sucking on coffee cups with a foot on the file cabinet or watching the news. And there was this one guy who had a phone to his ear, nodding, scribbling on a pad, and it was he who got my attention, because I wanted to know what he was writing. Gibberish, doodling, interlocking benzene rings, or had he so committed himself to the role that he had collected research on deals the firm would have been tracking that morning and was jotting from memory so that I, the participant, might in some way benefit from his method approach. I stood against the back wall in my green EOD suit, peering out through the acrylic visor at the scenery, and there above the windows, Eden was right. What a view. Were the LED clocks for London, Singapore, Tokyo, Frankfurt, Buenos Aires, Shanghai, Milan, New York, and it was 8:42 by my request. And when I said ready into the hands-free, the colons on the LEDs began to flash, and I prepared to die. I'd spent a month under the supervision of a psychologist, but when it was showtime, I didn't feel like I was Vic or myself or an all-seeing eyeball. I felt like I was a stranger to us both, someone who paid an outrageous sum of money to participate in an outrageous stunt in the name of distraction. I felt crass and dishonest and utterly American. I had a long 4 minutes to consider the implications of what I'd undertaken, the fiction I was creating, the familiar sense of life at a remove from life. I had time to consider the presence of Albert Caldwell within me. Yes, still there, always there, either directing me toward or away from the truth, from his frozen little cave. I couldn't tell which. I could never know, my existence being a dictatorship of ignorance. And at the mark, the windows erupted and fire stormed through the space, a rolling, rippling flood of plasma, incinerating carpet and paper, carbonizing the ceiling tiles, roaring like river rapids, exerting an unexpected force, a physical force. What had I expected? Seaweed lapping at my legs, lambs licking at lilacs, tongues of flame and all that? Certainly not this godlike presence crushing me from all sides, reducing, suffocating, combusting within me. The flaming analysts had all dropped safely into the subspace through the trap doors, and when the ceiling collapsed, my puckering throat sucked at the deoxygenated atmosphere, even though the EOD suit had been reinforced with a carbon fiber cage, so that I was wearing, in essence, a protective refrigerator, and the O2 was flowing normally. I'll stop there since we're bumping up against time.
Jack, I'm gonna read you some questions from from the other people on this. Could you comment on your relationship to music, given the scattered slightly off the beaten path references, Hiawatha, Townsend, Iggy? You know, there's John Caldwell, the singer who never missed a cue, never botched his blocking. His body was under control, kept his voice under control, no matter the venue. But it had turned out that the audience wanted a wild man, not a record player.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, both of my parents were opera singers, and I can remember standing out in the dining area of our apartment on West End Avenue in 70, I was probably 70, it was 75, 76, and my dad was practicing the Messiah in the living room. He had to record a record. And I would have been about 2 at that time. My earliest memories are my parents running scales in the bedroom. And they both had big voices. It was a big, powerful thing. And, I can't sing, but I can play musical instruments a little bit. And again, it kind of goes back to, musicality in the language is enormously important to me. And I thought in this book, why not just try to have musicality in the language, but actually talk about music itself? And I think usually writing about music is pretty bad. I don't know if I did that good of a job of it, but I sure enjoyed writing about it. And I loved writing about Miles Davis, playing Blue and Green, which is a song that weirdly connects me to my dad. I don't know that Dad ever really listened to jazz, but it's just something that was a timing thing. Yeah, music, it's enormously important to me. And songs like Lust for Life and certain Coltrane bits just absolutely floor me no matter how many times I listen to them, and reward kind of intense listening if I really concentrate on it. And it's something that I do a lot when I'm trying to get kick-started and I'm starting something new. So
of course, the truth is that when I asked your friends to send me questions, there were lots of friends and lots of questions. One of them was, how did you physically manage to put this story together? Was there, it's easy to imagine a wall, covered with plot lines, characters, so forth.
add that.
And what relationship did that have to being in Rome, which you were for a few years ago?
Yeah. So, I think it's been, the book is, I'm afraid to say that it's discursive and stop at that, because to me, it all fits together like a puzzle, but it looks like it's going off in 19 different directions at once, because it was for a long time. And the big challenge in the book was to figure out a way to interlock everything. And I didn't have that until I was about 2 years into it. And I was writing it in third person, and then Hazel showed up and it became a first person piece. And she said, "Oh, we can lock it together like this." And that happened when I got to Rome. And I had a year to write at the American Academy in Rome, which was a true blessing, because I'd still be working on this thing if not for that. And that was 2016, 17. And I did have a huge outline on the wall. I had multiple page outlines. With every revision, I would update the outline, and the outline would often take a month to get through, to get things ordered correctly, and to get the chronologies locked in. So it was, and I think some more experienced novelists might have been able to cut the time down a little bit, because this is the first really big, sprawling piece of writing I'd ever done. I kind of had to feel my way through it and stitch things together, and you know, lots of stuff wound up getting tossed out because it didn't fit what I was trying to do. And even very late in the process, like doing copy edits, you know, a week before it's gonna go to the printer or whatever, I found a chronological mistake. I was like, oh my God, you know, nobody would ever notice, I'm sure, but this kind of stuff makes me bananas. So yeah, the outlining got a little intense. The thing I'm working on now, much simpler. Like, I'm ricocheting back and forth between these hyper controlled, like, then super crazy, then, you know, going back, it's like rebelling against rebellion now.
Let me read you one more question. So, despite the misanthropy, you write with a reverence, and for your characters, that is as I think I was trying to say earlier, just really, you know, comes through very clearly. How do you reconcile the reverence with the hostility, or the not the hostility is the wrong word, you're almost putting these people through a process, like they have to suffer just as the writer does while they're trying to bring these characters to life.
That might be the answer. Why do I have to suffer alone? Why not? Come aboard, you poor bastards.
Maybe you also answered this question already, but it feels like there's a well, here, something concrete. Were you in that snowstorm?
Yeah, apparently, I mean, I was here. I lived in New York when I was a kid. I would have been 3. No recollection of it. None. But everybody I talked to who was, you know, sentient and, you know, like over the age of 10 does remember it. It was a very serious thing. But yeah, I mean, but that's, I mean, I feel like that's in a nutshell, like what's going, like, that's why I write this stuff, is because I was there. I have no idea what happened. I mean, there's the story of my childhood.
Do you think that part of you actually knows? You're trying to
Sure
extract it
sure
from yourself?
Sure, probably. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not an active therapy for me. I'm not solving anything. It's the constant repetitive act of trying to answer why, I think. And it doesn't fix it, but it certainly, I think you can transmute. I mean, there's also that crazy effect that if you do take an event from your own life and fictionalize it, the fiction will overtake in memory what actually happened. At least that's my experience. So, you know, maybe that's a little self-salvation or something. I'm trying to recast things the way I wish they were.
Well, lots of other questions, but I'm going to be mindful of people's time and wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you both, Jack and Ben, and thank you to this wonderful audience. And please buy the book if you haven't yet. The Plescher Party is available from McNally Jackson. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Maris.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.